Let me just do what I'm supposed to do if I remember here. And then I have to turn on some micro, that's correct. But then I have to turn on some sound, is that right? Or am I on? Am I on? Do I have to turn something here? PC portable, mic. Where we go, done, I think. Is that working? And the micro main off. Parfait. Je parle un peu de français, mais je vais parler en anglais. So, welcome, Geneva. Thank you very much, first of all, for the generosity of lending your time, lending your ears tonight. Your time and energy are your most precious possessions, and you're giving them very generously right now to my talk. And to make that worthwhile, I'm just going to say, I'm about to introduce myself, but I hope, and this is my commitment in this talk, is that you should look back on it as one of the most important things you ever heard. Not because of of my presentation, but because of the substance of it. I truly believe that what I'm talking about is one of those rare topics. And again, it's not a topic I came up with or I discovered, if you like, but of one of those rare topics, perhaps along with climate change and certain other issues, that really will shape the 21st century profoundly. And one of those things also, I think it was a very generous introduction by Francois, is that it seeks to be a vision. One of our problems, I think, is that we associate vision even with something like utopianism. We kind of compromise with small ideas. And actually, we're right now in the midst of a revolution that offers us incredible possibilities if we can seize it. And that is what I'm here to talk about tonight. I will start, though, just with some very brief words about myself so you know who I am and my context. I'm the founder and president of Open Knowledge, which is an international non-profit foundation which is dedicated to opening up access to public interest information and empowering people, citizens and organizations, with the capacity to use that information to address issues they care about. And Open Knowledge has been a pioneer since 2004. It started the open data movement. It has been a pioneer in digital policy around the world, and it is now active in over 40 countries around the world, including here in Switzerland. You may not know it because the name is different, but opendata.ch, which some of you may know, is a chapter of the Open Knowledge Network. And in addition to my work at Open Knowledge, I am an entrepreneur and a consultant advising governments and organizations how to succeed in the digital economy. Now today, I'm going to talk about a sustainable digital age, and in particular, how do we make new rules for a new world? And I want to start by talking to you about what I mean by a new world. And I want to start actually with my mother. So my mother is a farmer. That's not my mother, but it's one of my mother's cows. My mother is a farmer. My mother is 73, and so she is in one of the oldest professions known to mankind. And she loves animals. That's why she became a farmer. She absolutely loves them. And she has cows. And one of the things she gets concerned about is when cows have their little children, when they have calves, things can go wrong, right? It's like humans. Something can go wrong when the baby is born, and she gets very worried. And she gets so worried she wants to check on it all the time. And when she can't check on it, when she goes to sleep at night, she gets my father to go out into the shed and check on it, right? It's not very convenient. Now, and then one day, a few years ago, she rang me up on the phone, and she said, "What do you know about international text messaging?" And my heart sank, because my mother, along with being a farmer, is, let us say, a technophobe. She resisted email for as long as she could. The only reason, when she had a mobile phone, like that classic movie, when I said, how can I call you on your mobile phone? She says, "I can't. If I turn it on, the battery runs out." So she never turns it on. So I was a bit worried about what was going on here when she said, I've got international text messaging. But what it turned out is that she'd bought this device called MooCall, believe it or not. This is what it's actually called, that green device. And what it does is it can sense when the cow is going into labor by the contractions of the tail of the cow, and it sends you a text message saying, hey, your cow is coming. And my mother loves this because suddenly no more worrying, no more going out to check on the cow every few hours, no more getting my father up in the middle of the night. The point of this story is that my mother, who is a farmer, who really doesn't like digital technology, and is in one of the oldest professions of mankind, her life is being changed and impacted by digital technology. Right? Our economy has changed. We now have a digital economy. We're all very familiar with that. We're familiar with the phones, we're familiar with the apps, we're familiar with all the devices, we're familiar with software. But I want you here with me to look a little bit deeper than that. Because we want to look deeper at the digital economy. We want to look at what is the digital economy actually made of when we go beneath the surface. Well, it's made of information. When we talk about a digital economy, we really mean an information economy. Digital technology creates and enables an information economy. Right? That's what it really is. And if we look at information, well, what is information? I mean, we're all kind of familiar, but when we think it's bits, it's ones and zeros. In a digital economy, what those devices really allow is us to create information, to store information, to transmit information, ones and zeros. The gadgets of the surface, what's really going on is we have an economy. When you think of software, when you even think of things like medicines, what is inside a pill that you take? You think of it as a physical thing, you know, but really, what's really inside medicine is a recipe for a formula, a chemical formula, and that is information. Movies, statistics, software, all of them are information. If you like, you could even say that information is ideas made into bits. Right? Now, in what way is this new and different? Why is it so important to understand that it's made of information? Because there is something new and different. And I want you to get, again here, it's really important because I'm going through this, and you might be thinking right now, oh, this is so familiar, everything's always talking about this, absolutely. But there's something different that isn't just it's faster or better, right? It's different from the moment when, for example, horses got replaced by cars. That was new and different if you were used to horses. That was a big change. But this is actually more profound. Why is it more profound? Because there is a fundamental change, which is that we have costless copying. We have costless copying of information. That is not true of a car. We've had things that, for hundreds, thousands of years, we had things that were faster or better. But this is an actual shift in the substance of what we make. When I have a car and I lend it to my friend, I don't get to use it anymore. But when I give an idea to someone else, I still have it. Right here in this room, right now, ideas are being copied. Information is being copied from me to you. And I still have it. I still have that copy. And what's therefore important really about digital, what's really actually important about digital, because that was always true about information, that when I talked to someone thousands of years ago, I copied something costlessly to another mind. It replicated into their head. But digital makes costless copying a reality at global scale. And it's not just 6 people anymore, it's 6 billion, and we can do that at the click of a button. So we're in this new world, this new economy, and it's made of bits, and it's made of ideas, And it's one in which we can share costlessly if we choose. And that was never, ever, ever true before. When we had the Industrial Revolution, yes, we built things better, but you didn't get to do that. You can't costlessly copy a Ferrari, a house, a piece of bread, or my shoes. But you can do that with ideas and information. Now, given that we're in this new world, this new economy, do we need new rules? Or will the old ones do? The rules of how we run the economy in a society, can we just take the old ones and use them in this new world? Or do we need something new? Well, first of all, what do I mean by the old rules? And again, I want to tell you a story, and it's got cows in it again. So there's a story about cows, and it's about books, and it's about St. Columba. And it takes place 1,500 years ago, and it's a true story. So St. Columba was a monk, a very famous monk, and he was really passionate about, in his case, sharing Christianity and sharing knowledge of the Bible. And he had a teacher called Finian. And one day, Finian traveled all the way to Rome. And he came back from Rome with a copy of the Vulgate, which is the first translation of the Bible into Latin. This was incredibly precious because everyone spoke Latin. They didn't speak Greek or Aramaic or Hebrew. This was the Bible. This was precious. And St. Columba rushed off to Finian, his teacher, and said, "This is amazing, can I have a look?" And Finian said, "Absolutely, St. Columba, you can have a look at it, but you can't copy it. It's my book. I went to Rome to get it. If people want to read it, they have to come to me and get permission." And St. Columba, he said yes, but in his heart, he knew this was wrong, he felt. And he felt it was so important that he share the Bible that he decided he had to defy his teacher. And so in secret, he would creep into the church each night and copy out the Bible by hand behind his teacher's back. And then one night, Finian caught him. And they had a huge argument. And it was such a big argument, they actually went to the king, King MacDiarmid, to get it resolved because they couldn't agree. And King MacDiarmid listened to St. Columba, who said, "Look, information, this is precious knowledge, it should be shared, we should be able to copy it." And Finian, who said, "It's my book." And he handed down this famous judgment. And he said to St. Columba, "I don't know where you get your fancy ideas about books. If Finian had a cow, and his cow had a calf, the calf would be his. He owns the cow, he owns the calf. Books are no different. To every cow its calf, to every book its copy." And that exemplifies a very understandable and natural logic. For thousands of years, humans have been inventing property rights. It's complex rules. This is mine, you can't use it, or you can use it in these circumstances. And that was the rule. To every cow its calf. So let's apply that to books. To every book, its copy. And in particular, over the last 400 years, as information particularly has become more commercially valuable in our societies, we've been busy taking the old rules of real property, of things that exist physically in the world, like my shoes or my car, and applying those rules, or my cow, and applying those rules to intellectual things. We created intellectual property. Now, I want to emphasize that's both very reasonable, quite sensible, and in some ways has worked quite well. It was a very natural. When we've got one thing that's working, and we've got something new, let's apply the old thing that worked before. But what we do have is old rules in what is now a new world. Now, we want to ask ourselves, what is the impact of those old rules in our new world? How is it working out for us? And I want to show you that the impact is huge. And I want to start by telling you a story again. And again, it's a true story. It's so true that it has an improbable central character by the name of Mr. Frisbee. Now, Mr. Frisbee was born in 1963 in rural Florida, just south of Tampa. And at the age of 15, he went to work in an agricultural machinery business in Tampa. And he worked there for the next 30 years. And in his late 40s, he left the business, he had enough money, and he bought a small junkyard type business called American Dream Welding and Fabrication. Now that name is very symbolic because around him, during his lifetime, his American dream was disintegrating. It was definitely in need of welding, that dream. During his lifetime, the industrial economy that he got jobs in, that he worked in, was disappearing. Around him, the blue-collar sector was disappearing. Around him, his world was not really working. And when the recession came in 2009, he was really struggling. He went from 6 employees to 2, just him and his stepson. He has 5 children. His wife's daycare center goes bankrupt. The government are killing him with regulations, he thinks. And his world is not working. His world is disintegrating around him. And he looks around and he gets resentful. He sees people who are being successful. Why isn't it working for him? He resents immigrants because his world is not working. Now, the story I'm telling you may seem worlds away from what I'm talking to you tonight about, the digital economy, right? But there is this incredible coincidence, if you think about it, because just during his exact lifetime is the rise of the digital economy. When he is 5 years old in 1968, Intel is founded. When he's 12 years old in 1975, Bill Gates will drop out of Harvard to start Microsoft. When he goes to work at that agricultural machinery business in 1978 at the age of 15, Jobs and Wozniak will be in a garage in Silicon Valley starting Apple Computer. His exact lifetime mirrors the growth of the information age. Now that could just be a coincidence, right? It could just be a coincidence, but it isn't. Because while he can't see it, while Mr. Frisbee cannot see this connection, we can. That there is this deep, hidden connection between the growth of the closed digital economy running on the old rules and what is happening to him. Because his world is being impacted, right? Tractors have computers. Walmart can automate their inventory system. They can work with less skilled workers, with fewer of them. You can ship stuff from China, and you can ship stuff from China because we have computers to manage all those systems. It wouldn't have even been possible in the old world. So that these changes aren't just a function of free trade or choices by politicians to do this or that or globalization. They are a function of the information economy. And it impacts us everywhere. It's in what we consume and what we make. More and more of the value in our world, even when we don't see it, that's what's important for you to get, is now in information goods. Kids don't play on the street anymore, they play video games. You spend your money on phones, on TVs, on movies, on Netflix. You spend your money on information goods. And it's also true in our work. More and more of us work in the information economy. And I don't just mean high tech. I don't mean Silicon Valley or software or chip manufacture. But things like advertising and financial services are basically information economy businesses. And even in things like retail and agriculture, just think of my mother. She's now part of the digital economy in a certain way. Our entire economy has shifted. Our entire economy has shifted. And in that new economy, Mr. Frisbee doesn't have a job. doesn't have a job. And more than that, there aren't new jobs. Instead, they're in robots. Or more importantly, not really. We keep talking about robots because humans like to think about things they can see. What really powers a robot is its digital brain. Right? Robots are made of software and of information. And what's more important to see, we've had automation before, but there's something different about this one. Right? We had cars instead of horses, or dishwashers instead of washing up by hand. But this time it's different. And it's different because wealth is incredibly concentrated. And it's incredibly concentrated for a reason. It's incredibly concentrated because of costless copying. That very magical thing I told you before is leading this, because what it means in this world is that one man can own the IP for all the robots. That wasn't possible before, right? It's not like the old world we had. In the old world, a single apple farmer cannot supply apples to the entire world. But suddenly now, Bill Gates can supply an operating system to every person on the planet. Costless copying plus the old rules equals monopoly, because there's no way to compete, right? One person can supply everyone. It's like someone who's an apple farmer who can supply everyone in the world, and at zero cost of their cost of production, once they've made the first apple tree, if you like. How can you compete? Look at your devices. Look at your stuff. In any given vertical, there's a few. You're lucky if there's more than one. There's Microsoft Word. There's Facebook. There's Google. In every single area, you see one or a tiny few of competitors. Costless copying plus the old rules equals monopoly. And there's a second part of that. Costless copying means that all revenue is profit. In the old world, no matter how good an apple farmer I was, there was some limit, right? It cost me more money to make more apples, okay? And I made a certain margin. But every time Bill Gates wants to give you another copy of Windows, he just has to hit a button. All the revenue from extra copies of Windows is essentially profit. So these monopolies are extraordinarily lucrative. And the result of that is quite simple. We have the most extraordinary, unprecedented concentration of power and wealth in human history coming along. Facebook, look at these monopolies. Facebook, Amazon, Google, Microsoft. They're not some passing thing. People think, oh, that's happened. It's a fundamentally driven by the underlying economic dynamics of a digital economy when you have it running on old rules. And just take this fact, in 2016, 8 of the richest people on this planet owned as much as the other half of humanity. But 6 of those 8 people were tech billionaires. In 1975, when Mr. Frisbee was growing up, not one of the richest people in the world was a tech billionaire. Right? The wealth is concentrated not only in those companies, but within them. Because of the costless copying, one like Zuckerberg can own a massive chunk of Facebook. It's just a different world. And Mr. Frisbee doesn't understand this, but he sees what's going on around him writ large, and millions of other people like Mr. Frisbee. This is what's driving this graph. This is the graph that Piketty puts up, that when you hear all those talks about inequality, this is the growth. And look at it, 1970 is this massive divergence of inequality, of the rich getting richer and the poor nothing much happening to them. And guess what? It was also the takeoff point of the closed digital economy. And as I've now explained to you, that is not a coincidence. The fact that every one of those major tech firms started then, that the digital economy really began in the 70s, is not coincident with this massive divergence. There are other factors, but this is one of the single biggest drivers of inequality. And you've got to understand the impact of that. That is driving the biggest political and social changes of our time. Because Mr. Frisbee, he's angry. He's upset. He sees his job disappearing. He sees his security disappearing. And he's not one, he's millions. Those Trump supporters of blue and white collar workers who have lost their jobs, they've seen their wages stagnate. Look at this graph here. This is the real income of quintiles in the US economy. I'm going to do some, just for one moment, a little bit of stats in this talk. This is quintiles. This is the poorest 20% in America. This is the bottom 40%, bottom 60%. Their real income hasn't moved since 1970. They have actually seen, the bottom 60% of Americans have actually seen their real wages fall since 1999. Actually fall. And meanwhile, the very richest segments of society, the Wall Street bankers, the high-tech billionaires in Silicon Valley, they're getting rich. Right? And he sees them. He sees them. He doesn't understand why, but he is resentful and angry, upset, and he needs somebody to blame. And someone comes along and gives him an outlet and says, oh, it's immigrants. Oh, it's free trade. And he's given someone to blame, and he votes for that person. But that's not what's driving this. What is driving this is the old rules in this new economy. It's a world of monopoly. So this old rules and this new economy is what is driving the inequality that made Donald Trump president. If you want to understand the seismic political changes that we are watching today, you want to look to the digital economy running on old rules. And I want to tell you that it's not just inequality, right? The monopoly model of intellectual property has an impact on growth and freedom. Everyone right now is also worrying about secular stagnation, right? We don't have growth again. You know, in the Western economies, hey, we'll be lucky to have 1 or 2%, right? And also, we look at freedom. Now, what do I mean by freedom? I mean freedom to think, the freedom to debate, and the freedom of enterprise. In a monopoly economy, you don't have free markets anymore. Right? I'll just start with, though, the freedom of thought. Facebook decides what you can post. Facebook is basically becoming the communications monopoly. If I want people to find me, I have to be on Facebook. But Facebook decides what you post. I don't know if people know about this story about Napalm Girl, this very famous picture from the 1960s about the Vietnam War, and Facebook took it down because they decided it was offensive or whatever else. And right now, the weirdest things about the guys going on about fake news is they're going, hey, Facebook and Google, yeah, we're going to give you the power to start deciding what can even be found online. Right? Rather than actually having real competition, we're going to give these monopolies even more authority. They'll get to run political debate. And they have so much power. It's not just what you post. They are now shaping what we think and feel. Because, you know, you're not online if you're not found on Google or Facebook. Your news feed now more and more shapes what people discover. I watch my friends. They're just scrolling through their Facebook feed. You know, people now, in many developing countries, there are statistics that people think Facebook is the internet. Like they're like, Facebook is the internet. That is their experience, right? And to be clear with me, I've got no judgment of that. I'm on Facebook. You need to be. That's the function of a monopoly, is you don't have choice, other than in some very limited sense, right? Like, I have a choice to never be found, to post somewhere that no one will read me. Just to emphasize this, there was a paper in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. I don't know if people know that. It's one of the most prestigious journals in the world, in the US, published in 2015, showing that by changing what Google put on their search results page, they could change most of the elections in the world. The impact on undecided voters by just looking at what they found on their Google search results and what they therefore could find was significant enough impact on undecided voters that it would change elections in most countries of the world if Google were to be manipulating that in some way they chose to. There is no way that that level of social and economic power should be concentrated in that way. And I want to come to growth and innovation. I come to this one last because everyone thinks the information economy, the digital economy is just so innovative, right? And all those wonderful companies, right? But I think we confuse ubiquity with actual innovation. And I want to explain here a little bit, therefore, what I mean by the impact on growth and innovation. Famously, in Greek mythology, Kronos was the father of Zeus. And when he was told, when he was young, he was told a prophecy, as it were. He was not young, really, because he was immortal, but he was told earlier on in his career as a god titan, he got this prophecy that his children would rebel and overthrow him. So being a logical guy, he said, you know what I'm going to do? Every time we have a kid, I'm going to eat the kid. So he ate them. And they lived in his stomach in this story. And one day, one of them escaped. And then he let all the other ones out, and they did stage a rebellion. And eventually, they overthrew their parents. Now, what is the relationship of that story to what I'm talking about growth and innovation? Monopolies are like Kronos. They live in fear of being overthrown by their children. Facebook lives in fear of the social network that will one day overthrow it. Microsoft lived in fear of Firefox in the browser because they knew that was a competitive threat. It's why Microsoft nearly destroyed the modern browser. They got to 98% market share. They only got stopped by the antitrust authorities. Why does Facebook pay $23 billion for WhatsApp? To eat their children. In this case, they may be buying them, but eventually they're ensuring there will not be a competitor that will threaten them. They do it with Instagram, etc. That does not actually produce innovation. It only produces innovation compatible with what the monopolies already want. It stunts growth, it reduces returns to investment in venture capital, and it limits freedom to innovate. I mean, I just want to ask you a question today about free markets. If someone came along, however great they were, and said, hey, I'm going to take on Facebook. Do you want to invest in me? Who would ever invest in them? It doesn't matter how brilliant their idea. They're never going to be able to outcompete that monopoly. And that monopoly is driven by two aspects, the costless copying and, in fact, the platform economy, network effects aspect of the information economy and the information age. So to summarize, these old rules, no, they're not working. These old rules in a new world are creating huge problems. They have an impact on inequality, on economic growth, on freedom of thought and enterprise. And let me be clear, this is all over the world. I was in China with Tencent, exactly the same stories. And they'll all tell you how innovative they are, right? And yeah, we really love innovation. Well, they do, absolutely, but innovation won't ultimately threaten them or that they own. And it's generating spiraling inequality, social injustice, and economic stagnation, leading to exclusion, anger, extremism, and instability. If we go on this direction, there will be more Trumps. There will be more instability because we just have a widening gap between the haves and the have-nots. So we need new rules. We need new rules for a new world. And I emphasize to you that a better world is possible. We've got stuck in our thinking. We've got stuck in our old rules. That it can only be this way. We've got stuck in our mental models where if you go and talk to ordinary policymakers, and I've spoken to a lot of them, certainly those over 45, and they think bits are like bread. Just remember that phrase, bits are like bread. It's not true, but it's natural. Hey, a movie's like a car. Do you see all those adverts? You wouldn't steal a Hamburg. Yeah, it's not good to steal. Absolutely. Creators have got to get paid. I'm about to come to that. But that story is deep in our consciousness because we as human beings have lived for thousands of years in a world of physical things. And so we need to create new institutions. We need to create new legal forms. We need to restore free markets. We don't have free markets anymore in an information economy. As I said, just ask that question. Who would you back to compete against Facebook? That isn't a free market. A free market, anyone can start a business to compete in some area. That's what we kind of mean. And we need freedom to innovate. Actual freedom. And we need to create new institutions, just like we did hundreds or thousands of years ago when we created forms of property, for example. That was a great institutional innovation. We need to use the potential of costless copying to get the best of both worlds. We need an economy that is both dynamic and innovative and productive, and it's inclusive. And the thing is to understand is that costless copying makes that possible. In the old world, it's kind of a trade-off, right? We can't have both. We need an open information economy where knowledge is freely and openly shared, and innovators are recognized and rewarded. We need new roles for our new world. Okay? Now, let's look at that. As I said, markets are essentially diseased right now. They are infected by monopoly. There is no chance to enter this market. The old system is exclusive and inefficient. We need a new system that is dynamic and inclusive and that reinvigorates markets. So we need new rules to make this new world. Now, how are we going to do that? I want to give you a really simple example because it isn't hard. And even better, it's something we've already been doing for some time, in fact, decades. So imagine I'm running a radio station, and I decide that I want to play Madonna's Like a Virgin, okay? Now, this is not what happens. Hey, okay, I'd like to play Madonna's Like a Virgin. Hey, you're my lawyer. Can you get in contact with Madonna's lawyer? And I'd like to play it at 2:53 this afternoon. And I'd like to negotiate a rate. And then, the other lawyer picks up the phone, he calls Madonna's lawyer, they have a negotiation, and then we agree, like, I'm going to pay her 50p to play Like a Virgin at 2:53 this afternoon. That does not happen, right? Instead, radio stations pay a fixed fee every year into something called a collecting society, and in exchange, they can play any music they want. And the collecting society takes the time to go and do some statistical analysis to decide how often Like a Virgin got played and use that information to divide up the money they received and give it to artists. Now, do you understand what's fundamental is that is a world in which she's kind of traded in her intellectual property right, voluntarily you might say, absolutely, but she's traded in for something that's different. That something isn't look like an exclusive property right. That looks like some right to get paid, you could call it a remuneration right, whatever you'd like, but something different. Because it was clear that trying to make radios ring up and license every single track they wanted to play would be insane. It would be incredibly inefficient. It would be bad for artists, and it would be bad for radio stations. So we as a society innovated, and we came up with something different. Right? We innovated in our institutions and our legal forms. And it looks quite different because we created something different from intellectual property monopoly rights. We combined and we did something very clever because what we did for radio stations is we combined unlimited access, which makes sense because it costs nothing extra for monopolists, if you like, to make that extra copy. There's no cost. Right? It wasn't like she gave them a new car for free. It's just an extra copy of the music. That costed her nothing. Right? So they get unlimited open access and Madonna gets paid. Right? We got the best of both worlds, somehow. Now, we don't just need to do that for music on the radio. We can do it for every piece of information. We can do it for software, we can do it for statistics, we can do it for medicines, we can do it for movies. We can do exactly the same kind of model where we create rights, if you like, of remuneration rather than monopoly rights. You can create a big fund, for example, for medicines, where everyone pays into that fund, anyone can manufacture medicines, and the people who invent medicines get paid out of that fund. So you can still have biotech startups, you can still have venture capital, you have markets, but you have unlimited access and you have much more dynamic competition. You no longer have the ability of a monopoly to stop other people innovating. You no longer have the phenomenal wastage, by the way. It's estimated something like more than half of all R&D on pharmaceutical research in the world is simply a waste because it duplicates other R&D being done over here that no one knows about. And that is hundreds of billions of dollars of waste. So we have new rules for this new world. It's very simple. And in this world, we would have innovation and social inclusion. We'd have competition and cooperation and sharing. In this world, no one would be excluded from access to life-saving medicines, groundbreaking research, or innovative software. And if we want to combat extremism and build a dynamic, inclusive information economy that really works for everyone, then we need to do this. Come and join the open movement. We need to spread these ideas right now. We need to go and spread them to your community and talk to them about what matters to them. What's so crucial is to realize these things are not obscure things about educational resources or a bit of innovation. This affects basic politics, basic social justice, basic growth. It has something for everyone, whether you're a right-winger or a left-winger or in the center. This agenda, it delivers growth with social justice. It delivers competition and free markets while allowing everyone to have access to life-saving medicines. And it's all thanks to this magic, maybe you shouldn't say magic, this potential of costless copying. This new world is possible because this incredible aspect that you can costlessly copy information. It's different from the old world of scarcity. So take part in this. Come and join the Open Leaders Program. You can read my book for free. If you sign up, I'll give you an early copy. And what I want to leave you with is this is the biggest choice of the 21st century in policy, along with climate change. It's the biggest opportunity to choose open versus closed, to invent new rules rather than be stuck with the old rules. It's a simple, big choice that we get to make. But it's going to take something. It's going to take you, it's going to take us mobilizing to build an open movement. Come and do it with us. Come and do it with your community. We can make it happen. Thank you very much.
For questions, and we have these two mics here.
Do I need to turn on the mic probably here? Okay.
Questions? Yes, at the back, and then here, and then further. There's a lady at the back, and
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. It was very inspiring. Actually, I just wanted to share, I have a question, but I will first of all share a personal experience. So I participate in 2 hackathons. The first one was open data available, and fortunately we had the opportunity to start developing our project because the data was available. So we start since February, and now we are just by presenting the first beta version of our application in Amsterdam. So this is a big challenge for us, and this is only possible because the data, all the data that we needed is open. So in the second hackathon, we had a very interesting project, and we couldn't go further because the data was not available.
Right.
And I think really that in my case, I am a student, and I didn't have the knowledge that I could create innovation out of open data. And I think it's like really possible, and it's really inspiring that just by having the data out of there, you can push more innovation and also equity, because I am a student, and even a student can get benefit of that. So my question is just how we can push for more open data like behavior. Thank you.
Shall I answer that question first, or do we want to? Yes, is that right? Yeah. So first of all, it's just thank you for sharing the example. I think it's just really great point, because open data, particularly from government, obviously has just been sitting there, and by opening up, it's shown the incredible level of innovation that can happen. I mean, the other story I like to say to people is compare the internet, if you like, and Facebook. The internet was open network, and therefore we got this incredible flowering of innovation on top of the internet. In fact, Google and Facebook and Amazon all got built on this open platform that was the internet, that was open information. Anyone could get TCP/IP as a protocol, but Facebook controls what businesses connect to Facebook. What happens? They get to derive the revenue from Facebook. In the internet world, Tim Berners-Lee never got rich. Instead, it allowed this incredible flowering of innovation in which wealth went to many other people. And so I think your story is just brilliant because it shows the potential, like the incredible flowering and the value that gets generated when we have openness. What it brings, though, is to the second point, which is that fundamentally I do want to say today, which is the current, what we often associate with open, like for example, open source, is great, and I've run open source companies, and I think it's fantastic. But we have this very limited system because it's very difficult to make money. So for example, let's say you can use government open data because government are releasing it, right? We've funded them to do it. But if you tried to build an open data business, it would be very hard because you're giving away all this data for free. And how are you going to pay for the time of doing it? And so it's a very tough thing. It's not impossible, but it's very limited. Open, current, and if you like, trying to do open in a closed world, in the world of the old rules, basically doesn't work. It works a bit, but it's very, very limited. So what do we need to do? We need to have these kind of funds that I was talking about. We need some way that we're collecting money that goes to innovators who are creating open stuff. And so when you say, what do we need to do? There's a personal level. You can go and advocate the government to release more open data, and that's fantastic. But we need something that's more than that. We need open data and open software and open algorithms from companies from all around society. And so the thing to really do right now, I would say, is come join the open movement and come and advocate to build these types of things. Because we've built these funds for music, we could build them for software. We could say the city of Geneva or the state of Geneva should take its IT budget and put it in a fund that goes for open software in this market-oriented way, where it's not the government choosing what gets created, but they put it in a fund, and we could start funding open software creators or open data creators tomorrow at scale. There'd suddenly be a business model for doing open at scale. And that is what we really need to do, I would suggest.
Yes. Thank you for your very...
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for this very interesting talk. I see at the end that you encourage people to join this open data movement. Ultimately, this movement may become very successful in terms of innovation and start really generating some interesting data and findings. My question is, how do you protect your movement from being swallowed by the monopoly? Because the economic logic will always, these big monopolies have done that before, where whenever there were non-mainstream movements that developed, once they start being really successful, they can just buy them out, and cooptation happens. So how do you How do you protect your movement, or what is your vision from preventing these big monopolies to swallow movements like yours that may be very successful?
I guess, so I hear you, and I hear the worry of being, like, there's definitely an aspect which you may have to kind of debate or have an kind of be opposed by certain groups. I suppose I have a faith that here, in two senses. One is, I do think this is an extraordinary win-win. So, for example, countries that implement these kind of policies, and you could do this at a country level, a country could start saying, right now, just like we did, we don't even need to get rid of, patents or copyright. They could still be there, but we're going to start like an open medicines fund, for example. I mean, most countries in the world, many countries in the world, actually, it's the government who already buys all the medicine, pretty much, right? Because you have state-run social security for medicines, right? So they could just say tomorrow, look, we're going to start buying through this fund. You've got it, no longer, your medicines can be manufactured by any generics manufacturer, and we'll pay you for the innovation part through our fund. And I just think this model is just so much better, that it is such a huge win-win that that it is a kind of situation where it's strong enough that people, if they see that, can go for it. And even the monopolies, if you like, they're not, I don't think they're actually that strong politically, if you like. And I don't think they're bad. I don't think, for example, Mark Zuckerberg or Sergey Brin or Google are bad people. I think they're actually, possibly they're actually quite decent people. But they live inside that logic of the system. It's like today, if I want to start a company, I'd have a really hard time straight-facedly going to investors and say, I'm going to do a pure open source business model. Like, it's just tough. So what I'm saying, though, is I'm saying to them, hey, guys, your system's working, but let's create this better world. Now, some people won't come with me, but I think there's really such an opportunity. And I also would point out that, this point is so, in a way, it's clear also because governments have funded it. Governments have decided to fund information. For example, I think it's fair to say, right, no one thinks the United States is a well-known socialist country, right? It's clearly capitalist, right? Right, and I don't think this is even relating to capitalism, socialism. That's my point. But let's say there's no way most countries would say, I'm going to fund 50% of all Apple production or all steel production by the government, right? That would be considered pretty unusual. But the United States funds 50% of all medical R&D directly by government. Now, my point is, the whole point is it's got nothing to do with socialism and capitalism, if you like. I'm a big free markets guy, as you can hear. I just think it's just a different world, and people haven't woken up to that. So my answer to you is that, yes, it won't be easy, but I think the vision is so powerful. And second, I will end with, if we don't do it, these problems are getting worse. Inequality is a huge issue. It was the fundamental reason Trump got elected, and as I explained today, that is being driven by the closed digital economy. So, there's just these huge problems coming down the track if we don't do something. I was in China in February, and I tried to explain, China, I think it was an amazing country, it was really incredible to be there. But I think there's a sense sometimes this is a problem, Trump is some problem, crazy Americans. When I mention Trump, people kind of laugh, it's a bit of a joke, how could they have this guy? I'm like, Foxconn, which by the way makes your iPhone, is the big, does everyone here know what Foxconn is in the world? Foxconn is the single biggest employer in the world. It has more than 1 million employees. Manufactures the iPhone, does it in China. They're about to replace 60,000 staff with robots next year. They plan to replace all of their staff with robots between 20 and 2025. What is going to happen to those people? They're Mr. Frisbee in China. But if we build a different information economy, we can have the growth, we can have the dynamism, and we can have inclusive growth. And I think that story is just going to get so powerful over the next decade because we are really starting to reap the whirlwind of 30 years of a closed digital economy. There's a gentleman just behind, yeah.
It's me, I guess.
Yeah, and then this gentleman.
Thank you so much for saying what you said. I wish more people would hear it in the local area. I have a question. I'm sure you've given some thoughts on what you see as opportunities of the blockchain technology in connection with the open movement. I'd like to hear your take on that.
Well, I don't know what that means. I guess if I'm gonna, this is one where I'm gonna be just really straight, like basically zero. Blockchain is a delusional fad for this side of the movement. I'm not saying blockchain is not an interesting technology. I mean, I'm from a mathematics background. I understand blockchain. I think it will have uses in some areas of fintech and in other areas. But the kind of ideas about like decentralization or like some weird relationship people have to like, I don't know, will allow us to be more democratic in some way, just have zero credibility in my sense. I mean, I'll explain that in a little moment why I'm saying that. And I'm also a bit concerned about the blockchain because I want to get something about this talk, right? Just for a moment, I'll come to the blockchain, but I'll come back. There is a wave of techno-solutionism sweeping our societies. It's represented in many TED Talks, in a lot of the discussion even about digital technology. It's like we have some social problem. Maybe it's climate change. Maybe it's not enough voting. And we're going to build an app for that. Not enough people voting? I've got an app for that. People not doing enough on their climate emissions? I've got an app for that. Right? And in a deeper sense, we have a techno-solutionism. And the best exemplification of that I can have is some guy, I do hang out a lot with people who do like civic tech and worry about voting, and they're now really activated about like Trump, obviously, and Brexit. And the guy was like, you know, just look at it. I mean, look how much we've innovated in the internet in the last 20 years. We haven't innovated in democracy in the last 2,000 years. Now, for me, the chain of logic went the other way. For him, the chain of logic was, we've got all this tech innovation. Let's just apply it to democracy. And I'm like, no, what that implies is democracy is a hard problem. The problems democracy have, there's no easy solution to from tech. So let me just break it down. What are problems of democracy or of just collective action? Has anyone here lived in a shared house in their life? Like a house in which it wasn't just them and their partner and their children, but like when they were a student, for example? Yeah, put up your hand if you did that. Was there ever a problem about the washing up? Yeah? Yeah. Now, there are people building apps for that. You know, like, I'll take a picture of the washing up, it was my turn, I've done it now. Now, I'm not joking, they are a little bit useful. I'm not saying they're no use, but they're minimal use, because what's the problem of living in a shared house? It's a collective action problem. It's a coordination problem, right? The basic problems of democracy are like living in a shared house. In fact, they're just two. One is called the collective action problem, which is when we get together in a group to do something, maybe I can just not bother, right? Like, you're going to do the washing up, so I can just shirk off. Or we're going to all put money together to pay for the Ministry of Defense, you know, to pay to have an army so we don't get invaded, but I'm going to shirk on my taxes. Because that way I still get the army, because you're all going to pay, and I don't have to pay for it. Right? That's a classic problem. The other problem is called the principal agent problem, which is that I appoint someone to look after things for me. I'm an investor in a company. That doesn't mean I want to run the company every day. Or I'm a citizen in a democracy. It does not mean that every day I want to have to think about what are we going to do about pension rights for veterans, or like how we're going to build the sewage system in my city. I want someone who I've kind of hired or voted for to deal with those issues. Just like we appoint managers in the company or we elect officials to represent us. But the problem is that person is not me. So they sometimes go off and do things I don't want them to do. Or they don't perfectly represent me. Now those are just hard problems. And tech makes very little difference to them, unfortunately. They make a little bit of difference. Like I can now much more easily find out what going on in the Bundestag or like in the parliament, because I can send an email about it or read it online. But you know what doesn't get any cheaper? Actually reading up and understanding what the vote was about, and then making an informed decision about what you want your actual elected official to do, and then writing a sensible letter to them that isn't just a copy and paste of someone else's letter. None of that gets cheaper. Now the only answer you might say is, we'll have AI. One day we'll have an avatar that completely represents my political preferences. And it will just represent me in this. Oh, right, okay. Well, at that point, we'll basically have full AI, and a lot of the bets are off at that point, right, about what's going on in society, let's be honest. So You know, those are just hard problems. And people, I'm just saying, coming back therefore to the blockchain, the people who get more excited about the blockchain aren't just like, hey, it will allow us to run stock exchanges with like 0.5% transaction fees rather than 1.5%, you know, or something, right? Which is like, you know, that's a benefit, although when you've looked, transaction fees have come down over the last century a little bit. I'm not sure it's exactly improved the allocation of capital as much as we would have liked. Hint, hint, the recession, right? Yeah? Well, blockchain, people think it's going to solve these hard collective action problems, or these hard, you know, distributed collection. And when you actually look at the blockchain and say, okay, can you explain to me how that's going to work? It disappears in a puff of smoke. There's absolutely no explanation, really, of how that's going to really make any difference. And that's evident in the DAO. This huge blow-up last year of the distributed autonomous organization where some guy hacked it. It was like, there was nothing they were really doing that you couldn't have done in a joint stock company in terms of actual collective decision-making via email, except they were doing it illegally by violating security laws all over the world, by receiving large amounts of money without having proper security laws procedures, by the way. I mean, the DAO, like most of the blockchain crowdfunding, are just completely illegal, right? They take money from uninformed investors for incredibly speculative projects that sometimes look like Ponzi schemes. Right? I mean, like, just don't get me started there. And the point about it is, what worries me, to go back to the story, my story today is about political action to create new rules. It isn't a tech story. Tech is the driver of a world of costlessly copying. But the way that works out, the way that the wealth we create gets divided, the way that innovation can happen, depends on us getting together politically and creating new rules of the game. There's no tech part in it, really. The only tech part is like, hey, we can trace where money goes a bit more easily now. Like, I can work out how much Madonna gets played more easily than in the past. And so what worries me about the blockchain is its classic techno-solutionism, where it diverts the energy of this activist community or non-activist community into techno-solutionist pipe dreams because we're lazy, right? Like, we're just like, oh, yeah, like, democracy's hard. Maybe someone will come up with an app for that, you know? And I'm lazy. Like, we all are, I get it. But it's like, that's what concerns me about the blockchain, is it represents this tendency to think that we've got some technological solution to these social problems. But the answer is political about these rules of the game and how we build them really here. It's the rules we create that shape how the technology is used. And also, there's one fundamental big change that has happened. It's costless copying. That is the fundamental, huge change. If you go away from here tonight with one idea, it's that is a revolution. It's not the internet. The internet is part of that because it enables cost, but it's that costless copying has come at global scale. That transforms the opportunities of our world economically. I had one other question. Where is the mic?
Yeah.
You and then this lady. Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, just wondering that about the authenticals issues problem. You talk about security, that how people hack the program, and the other thing is how can we assure about the statistic is they like we've not been cheated by them, and also the other thing is about the rules that you're talking about is quite amazing. But do you have any concrete rules that will be stated in your books?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Maybe you could just clarify for me, just to check there. You said how things don't get hacked. Do you mean what did you mean? You mean like,
because now we all rely on the data and all of the statistics that we have, like Google Analytics,
right?
And then like we got all the information, but how can we assure that these informations they are all authentic?
Do you mean when we're starting to track how much stuff gets used for these funds, or what do you mean? Or
yeah, that's right, yeah.
Right, great question, by the way. Excellent question. Because one of the things you could say was like, hey, Rufus, if you're going to have this world where this kind of, like the radio, there's this collecting society and then the money gets given out, you know, how do we know that it's not getting cheated in some way or messed around? One aspect, obviously, is I think you could have very significant transparency compared to, for example, collecting societies today, which aren't always beacons of transparency, right? You could have quite automated algorithms and quite transparent funds, right? You could be very, very, hey, you could literally see the money in the fund, in the bank account, and you could see how it's divided up. I think in addition, I think you'd like to enable people who receive money from the funds to actually have arguments about it. So imagine, for example, Francois and I come up with an incredible cancer drug, and Francois comes up with an incredible cancer drug. And we're getting money from this medicines fund, let's call it the free market medicines fund or whatever, right? That's paying us. And Francois and I might have debates. Like I might say, I saved 10,000 lives last year. I'm entitled to X amount from this fund. And Francois would say, well, I saved 20,000 lives. And the fund could say, well, you can't both be right because you're talking about the same set of patients. And only 10,000 of them, there are only 10,000 patients. You can't have both saved 10,000 lives. And so you could also delegate. I mean, I'm getting a little bit detailed here, but you're asking a really good question, which is like property rights. When you build new legal rights, you need it to be what you call robust to cheating, right? That's what you're fundamentally asking. How do we make the system robust to cheating? Now, one aspect of that, I just want to emphasize again, is the fund is capped. You put a certain amount of money in the fund by society, and there's no more money than that in the fund. So there's no way for just to go, oh, we had 1 billion views of Madonna's Like a Virgin last year, right? And we just keep paying out. Society caps that. And in addition, you have transparency, you have algorithmic transparency. And finally, I want to emphasize for those privacy nuts out there, I don't track every person listening to Madonna's Like a Virgin. Just in case you're wondering. We do not all have to install on our phone, all of us, things that show what we listen to. We can just take a statistical sample. Some lucky few among us in Switzerland can install an app on our phone that tracks what we listen to anonymously, or what news we watched. Think of another area that's in trouble at the moment, news. Just again, like medicine or music, we could have we could have a collective fund, we could give out remuneration rights, we could do the same kind of things. So that is the answer to that. And you had a second part to your question, which I'll try and answer more quickly. What was your second part of the question?
Yeah, the second question is about what is the rules that you are going to apply? Like you're talking about for open chances for leaders, like for people to involve with your new rules revolution, but I don't really know that kind of rules that you really.
So what are the new rules?
Showing, yeah.
So the new rules are things like this, where, as you said. Just like with radio, we innovated. We took intellectual property rights that people had, like Madonna has her copyright, and we sort of turned it into something different. The radio doesn't have to go and buy a copy of it every time. They pay a fixed fee into a fund. So it was kind of just like at one point, humans had to invent property rights, right? Do you get, just for a moment, marvel at property rights in the traditional sense? Think about it. You can take ownership in a building and you can put a mortgage on it. You can kind of sort of take this underlying right and try to say to the bank, you've got this right now and I get some money. Property rights are really quite elaborate as a structure. And we need to create those kind of structures that allow for open access and creators getting paid. And take advantage of the costless copying. And the simple, basic way to do that is to put money collectively in a fund in some way where it could be an information cooperative, if you like, or it can be the government acting as the cooperative, as the kind of steward, and then you pay out that money in a market-like way. What's crucial is you don't get government involved. The government just holds the money, but then the money gets given out transparently and kind of automatically in a market-like way to the people whose innovations are used. So what you're creating is some new kind of right. It will look different from a property right. It will look more like a remuneration right. It's the right to get paid from this fund. And that right will look a little bit like a copyright, by the way. You can sell it to people. You can raise money against it from VCs. You could say, I've come up with a new remuneration right for my incredible drug. I'm going to get paid out of this fund for the next 20 years based on my drug saving people's lives, and I could sell it to someone. Or I can raise money to do the clinical trials from venture capitalists. So that's the innovation. I mean, it's not, by the way, if I wanted to get deeper, I think there are other innovations we need in this new information economy. We need to prioritize education much more. We need to train people with new skills. But the fundamental institutional legal innovation around rights is in this area. And it's quite easy, relatively. It's hard because it's always hard for humans to do new things, right? I don't know if you're like me. Whenever I go to restaurants, I always order just about the same thing I had last time because it tasted good, right? You know? Okay, one last question, I think, from this gentleman. Then we should, if we, very kind. Thank you very much. And what a great question. Thank you very much for answering that.
Thank you for your very inspiring talk. I liked it very much, and for your comments. Especially I liked the part where you said we got new technology, the conversion of the society, and we try to apply old rules to new problems. And actually I think we don't apply them immediately. At first there is some liberty, and then people are trying to bend the rules to cover the digital stuff in a way that's not appropriate. And if you look at copyright, and we have WIPO here in Geneva, they exactly did that. And the copyright has been reformed in a bad way a couple of times because they said we have to make it fit for the digital age. And in fact, they did the exact contrary. Yeah. And we had this kind of society for copy machines that did photocopying in Germany, for example, like VG Wort or GEMA for music, and they didn't adapt in a way that it was working, and now they're not a solution, rather a problem. How can you address? Do you address organizations like WIPO to really change the path they're thinking?
Yeah. So I really had the question was who should we go and address to really hear these ideas? And so absolutely WIPO is one place, and I've been in the past. I'd like to go again and talk with them. And I think there's something, I mean, I'd love it if WIPO was called the World Innovation Policy Organization, right? Because I know I have sympathy in that because they're called the World Intellectual Property, it's like they've got a hammer, so everything's a nail. And what they really care about, obviously, is innovation and human well-being. And I think one of the problems is that we've kind of ended up stuck in this, we've got a hammer, so everything's a nail. And what I'm suddenly saying is like, hey, I've got a screwdriver. Your hammer's not bad. It's definitely been useful. Like, let me be clear, copyright and patents have had lots of benefits in stimulating innovation. They've also had downsides. And right now, particularly in a digital world, where we've got this costless copying, it's really in our way. So the answer to you is, yes, I go to those places, and we should go. Many of you in this room, like, a movement is made of us. And I really believe that in our time, whether it will be in the next 5 years or the next 30 years, I don't know. But this will come to pass because it is basically in line ultimately with the logic of the information economy. But it will happen thanks to people taking action. It will happen because enough people like you or others in this room will see that this system is not working, and that more importantly, a much better system is possible. Like, really incredible system. And I mean, the one I also like to think about is the internet. People think of the internet as this golden moment in the 90s of innovation. I mean, it really was extraordinary for those of us who got to live through it in a little bit, right? It was just amazing. I remember going online in 98, kind of 97, and just being like, oh my God, like, I used to have to go to the library. I was lucky I got to buy books, but I remember there being books I couldn't buy, and suddenly like, there was all this stuff online. It was extraordinary. And that was partly also because the internet was open. We don't realize, but it's like, unlike Facebook, anyone could build on it. And that's what led to this incredible flowering. So we know what it's like. And I think that's what we've just got to see, is that we need to take action. So I'd ask you, in this, it's like in this room, I think this is the single biggest political opportunity of your generation, of your lifetime. And unlike other things, it's kind of, we've got quite an easy answer. It's not trivial to have it implemented. But every single one of you, I bet you if you thought, knows one other person who this would be worth telling about. So my invitation at the end of this evening is that you pledge, and you can pledge by putting up your hand, that you're going to tell one other person the next week about these ideas who you think this would make a difference to. So who would like to make that offer? And think of that person in your mind. Great, thank you very much, Geneva. Thank you for Francois.
So ladies and gentlemen, thanks for staying. I do believe that there is a networking cocktail now.
Yep.
And I would like to say just a few words of thanks before we all split here to Steve Baroun for sharing his open event about openness in education, to Radu Suciu for sharing Open Glam, openness in archives, to my colleagues here, Rosie, Susanna, and Thomas, for sharing the Open Geneva hackathons. 21 hackathons, or 22 now, all over Geneva for the next 2 days. And Rufus will be appearing and disappearing from many of these. Please look online if you haven't chosen yours yet. So hopefully the spirit of openness that you brought to us, but also the very critical thinking about how to change society to take benefit of this openness, we will go home and we'll think about that a long time.
Thank you. Thank you.